Thank you all for your patience as we're just waiting for the last few people to join here before we go ahead and get started. I'm just going to go ahead and give it about another 30 seconds or so. Okay, with that, I think we should be good to get started as we go ahead and proceed to welcoming everyone to the Vivit SIG Talk on quality and testing, specifically looking at proven practices here on the 9th of January 2018. For those of you who do not know, Vivit Worldwide is an independent software user community where you can share, collaborate, exchange, and grow. Our mission is made up of 3 primary areas, those being advocacy, community, and education. This Vivit SIG Talk is going to hit on all 3 of those elements, and really looking forward to providing our 40,000 members worldwide this great content that we're going to be sharing. Again, introducing kind of what is next, this Vivit SIG Talk concept. You can see we're going to be using the hashtag Vivit SIG Talk on Twitter to continue the conversation, but the idea is we wanted to really focus the conversation around a few areas, starting with quality and testing. We've got sessions that are going throughout the entire year this year, and we're inviting roughly 3 speakers per session. Each one will be speaking for 12 to 18 minutes each and sharing a very specific topic. If you're interested in participating as a SIG Talk speaker for one of our 2018 quality and testing topics, or maybe you just want to suggest a speaker or suggest a topic, would encourage you to take the survey. There's just a few questions in there that will help capture this information, and as you can see, this is how we're laying out the calendar for the year. All of this is available online. Again, you can look through the various dates, the different talk titles, and then who's going to be moderating or hosting each of those talks. What you will notice, this is the 2nd Tuesday of every month, and we will be having the events at 12 noon Eastern. My name is Todd DeCapua. I have the distinct privilege of being able to host today's SIG Talk session. I am the Executive Director of Global Technology at JP Morgan Chase & Company, and have been active with Vivit Worldwide as well as the Mercury local user groups for 20 plus years, and also sit on the Vivit board as a board of director. As you had seen while we were waiting for things to get started, we've got some wonderful speakers today. We've got Petar, who's at Bank of America now. We've got Jonathan, who is at Digital Assured, and also Stuart from MyLoadTest.com. I will be introducing each of them right before they get started with their sessions, so stay tuned for more on that. A little housekeeping from a webinar perspective. This live session is being recorded. These recordings, as well as the presentations, will be made available to you and all members of Vivit Worldwide to be able to not only review the slides, but also the video, and I hope that you would share this as we look to continue, again, advocacy, community, and education. In the upper right-hand corner, as most windows you're probably familiar with today, you can click to go ahead and expand this to make it larger, should you want to be able to view that a bit better for you, that being in the upper right-hand corner of the presentation pane. In addition, as you look through the session Q&A, want to be able to provide you with an opportunity to choose the language in which you would like to ask your questions. To do that, you can follow the 3 simple icons at the bottom of this slide showing how you can click on the flag, then select the language that you would prefer and click apply. Then within the Q&A pane, be able to ask your question and then simply click on the ask button. Also want to let you know, again, hashtag VividSigTalk is something that we will be using. If you wanted to hear it a third time, we're encouraging you to tweet your questions to hashtag VividSigTalk. This is not only for this live event, but also moving forward. If you're watching this as a recording, feel free to put something out there with hashtag VividSigTalk. And again, we're constantly monitoring that to continue the conversation with you. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce Petar Puskaric. Petar will be sharing the proven practice of performance engineering personnel mining. There's a lot more behind that, which I know Petar is very much looking forward to sharing with us. I've gotten the opportunity to know Petar over the last 20 plus years through a variety of different channels, one of which has been Vivid. Petar has a deep technical competence across a wide range of technologies. I guess I would also explain him as almost having this MacGyver-esque problem-solving ability, which he's quite a legend for in many of the circles that he operates. Petar is also comfortable working on technical issues, as well as teaching others in how to do what he does. With that, Petar, I will turn it over to you. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Petar Puskaric, and I'm a performance engineer with Bank of America for the last year and a half. And welcome to the Vivid SIG Talks. And today I'm going to be talking about performance engineering personnel mining. We're going to cover what to look for in a performance engineer candidate, where do we actually find the candidates, what questions are helpful to ask during that actual interview, whether it's on premise or via Skype session, remotely or whatnot, and then also what to avoid. Many of these topics directly come from my experiences the last 20 years in the profession, and as well as most recently seeing a few of the topics that I'll mention at the end of the SIG Talk concerning what to avoid in this process. All right, so to start off with here, we're going to take a look at, what are we looking for in a candidate? I'm going to start off with, we're looking for a good mix of soft skills and technical skills. The soft skills are your typical ones where you're looking for someone who can communicate well. Will they get along with your team, demeanor-wise? More of those intangible kind of qualities when you're looking for building your engineering teams. But you're also looking for those hard technical skills. Do they know what they know? Can they actually do something? That was a big topic that has come up with several major engineering firms that I've interviewed with over the past year and a half or so, where it's not about that the topics, it's have you done them? Can you actually perform the tasks? Have you actually had seat time with the different technical commands? And have you actually performed the actions they're looking for? And I think that's, pretty standard requirement. The big one that I've been talking about for a long time is you're looking for an engineer that can think like an engineer. And what does that exactly mean? Well, that kind of means more of, expounding upon that combination of soft and technical skills of an engineer. Do they ask engineering type questions, looking at details, based off little comments that you've made with them, kind of sparring back and forth in the preliminary processes. When you're asking about, different traits of, say, if you're looking at a situation where you're building a scenario, are they concerned about looking at the model itself? Are they looking at the timings around SLAs? Do they even ask about if SLAs are available? Many topics like that. If we're talking about weather, are they looking at the, is it Celsius or Fahrenheit? Are they interested in the trends across different processes, whether it's looking at your particular field or, even talking about the weather, looking at the trend over the last 20, 30 years, what are some of their interests like that? Is it an inquisitive mind? And that's what we're kind of looking for any of these engineers, and especially a performance engineer, where we're trying to hone in on the candidate that has the ability to see those performance trends across many systems, many indicators, many graphs, that kind of thing. We're also looking at the ability to communicate with engineering details, and that's what I've touched upon there a little bit in that first part. It goes along with it. Are they communicating in numbers? Is it important to them that, maybe, yes, they said, oh yeah, I am 12 minutes early for the interview. That's usually an indicator there. When they're answering questions, especially about topics of, say, events that they've happened to perform at other companies, are they giving details such as we have 53 virtual users, but we only know that 7 of them were active at any given point in time across 6 front-end servers and 4 databases, and we know that connection pools are, say, 100 wide. Things like that. Using the numbers to indicate that they're thinking in those along the lines of the details involved with what you're actually looking for. I also look for, are they asking questions related to these interview topics that we're already focusing on? So in a couple interviews we've given, the candidate basically came back and said, well, this particular question you're asking is great, but are you really asking this? And was like, okay, great. At least you're pushing back on us, and you're trying to fully understand the direction of where we're going with the questioning. And that is a very good sign for me when I'm giving one of these interviews. Do they come back with, say, oh yeah, I've actually done this particular quest in finding an answer to a performance problem, and oh yeah, instead of with changing a queuing methodology, we changed it by just adding another server in this one position, or we changed a cache methodology on one of the other servers in order to get this other feature to enable. Basically, are they responding and asking those questions that show that they actually know the topics? Another one I look for is the candidate willing to learn the tooling that you're asking about and hiring for? I know there continues to be the whole difference between open source tools, commercial tools. In our case, and we're this particular Vivit group, we're looking at LoadRunner, Performance Center, StormRunner Load, that kind of stuff. So if your shop, in our case, we're looking at Performance Center. Do they have the Performance Center experience? Do they know how to use the virtual user generator commands? Have they actually recorded and played back? And what happens on a playback failure? Asking those questions there, but also trying to figure out, if they are JMeter specific in their skill set. Are they willing to learn to use VUGen and LoadRunner and Performance Center? It's going to be a tough way to go if that willingness isn't there to at least learn and even suggest say new improvements and features to the processes that you have once they are on board. Then finally, the ability to quickly estimate engineering specifics. And this question is more along the lines of the interview questions that we give, where we specifically ask and say, can you come up with an actual load scenario where you have an SLA for a process that takes, say, 2 minutes, and you need to do 6,000 of these particular functions in an hour. And that's really all we give. And there's a lot of unknowns. And can they come up with, say, a 120 user scenario, whatever they come up with certain think times, certain pacing times based off of cycle and iteration times that they baseline. There can be all sorts of answers in there, but can they come up with that on the fly? It's amazing how many candidates that really get stumped on this particular question. And, we're kind of wondering, okay, have they actually looked at performance modeling? What kind of engineering have they actually performed in the previous roles? But, if they come up with, a reasonable answer with some thought behind it, that's very, very good. All right, now that we've talked about, what we're looking for, now we're going to say, where do we actually find these candidates in the wild? And most times, some of the best candidates we found are actually from staff recommendations that are already on board with you. This is very important because usually companies do have bonus programs for finding qualified candidates once they're on. But it's also great that you start bringing in a functioning team atmosphere will basically breed that back out. So your current staff will want to have their friends to work with them, usually. And normally those friend relationships allow for such that the quality is going to be there too, since the person on your staff doesn't want to bring anyone in that's going to be a detriment to the group as a whole either. So that usually works out pretty well. Other places we've had are looking at, our traditional technical and staffing firms. These are a little more risky because a lot of these will end up being, some of the, you're going to get the cold interviews coming in from those. And generally, the resumes are usually pretty good. But that's what we'll have to ferret out in the next part of this when we start asking them the questions during the interviews. Traditional staffing sites are also out there. One of my favorites is actually Indeed.com. The quality of the resumes out there seem to be very, very high. And I also have had some experience with one of their other affiliated sites. And then Monster, LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a great way to validate your candidates as well as also looking at finding them. LinkedIn gives you the ability to also look around who they're related with in the industry in different fields as well. And then finally, in that, you've got the corporate hiring portals for your own organizations, and that's where all of these particular resumes will basically be funneled into, so you can get them into your normal corporate hiring practice. One of the pieces I've added here is also through contacts made through your own industry conferences and group participation, such as Vivid. Many contacts are made throughout the professional industry groups, such as this, and has helped many people along the way in their careers. It's always great to participate in the different special interest groups or your local chapters, being in contact with like-minded engineers, but also it gets you out into the full industry, and then you can compare and contrast where you are professionally with them, learn new tips and tricks, make new friendships that may carry on to another firm in the future. All right, now for some of the fun interview pieces that we've come up with over the last 2 years or so. We're looking at what questions do you ask an interview in order to basically ferret out who's a good potential candidate for you and your team. So what I like to do is I look at open-ended questions that show that engineering thought process. Anything like I mentioned before to where you're giving them very vague requirements, which we are all familiar with, and say, hey, come up with how you would suggest a scenario be built out of these particular facts. Many times individuals will come up with something completely random that we never even thought of before, and that's kind of fun to go with as well. Questions pertaining to I and not we are extremely important. This was one of the the tips and tricks of the interview process that I learned in my last transition. We were looking for candidates that are empowered to do their craft and have not hidden behind an entire team, some cases, or organization. We is great, but it just is an indicator of you were part of the team, but you want to know what have you done inside the team. In some cases, if you say we too much, it's very much a detriment to your case. The next piece there would be, you're going through the interview process, basically look for your candidate to match up with your tooling specific questions that you're asking. And we're looking for, the whole mix for easy questions and hard questions. The easy questions are just there to make sure that they validate that they cover your actual tooling. So is it a virtual user generator question around correlation or parameter direct calls? What about regular expression calls within that? Can they even describe in, say, Performance Center where to go to change a runtime setting for a particular group, that kind of thing? Just to see, can they actually perform the actions that your group is doing on a daily basis? And then finally, this particular question, are there some hard questions? And we ask these really obscure questions, generally from the experience from our top individual contributors, just to see where they stand in the field. Some of my favorite questions arrive around looking at, now it's the Micro Focus diagnostics. It's one of the most underrated but most complicated tools I have worked with over my career. And there are many, many caveats in that system and what you can do with it and how you can screw up systems very quickly. So I'll ask questions on implementation in Java and how you handle classes and methods within the actual instrumentation and see if they've used it or not. If it's on their resume, I definitely ask. And definitely more obscure questions come out of anything listed on their resume that are listed as a hard skill. So if you're looking at C++, you're looking at Java, Visual Basic, looking in the different the tooling around, say, JMeter or even, say, databases, the Oracle and SQL Server, that kind of stuff. Going back to what I've mentioned a few times now, looking at performance-related modeling questions as well. This goes back to that, the open-ended questions from before. Can you display the fact that you can create a performance model from a bunch of different inputs? We usually have about 5 or 6 of those questions throughout the process. One of the next one here is one of my favorites, which is basically asking the candidate for just a brief explanation of how they ended up in performance engineering. Normally, the best candidates actually do have a story, and it's usually involving around some pivot point in their career, whether they switched from development into performance, or they've always liked performance, or they always like solving problems or coming up with answers, to those really hard, bizarre questions, even in other industries. The next piece that you'd want to ask, and when you're looking down through the resume, this is really where it comes important, where you're basically validating any shared history that shows up across that resume. So in one case, we had one individual say that they actually worked with me at another organization during the same time period that I would have been there. So we kind of asked a few questions to see, gee, were they really there? Unfortunately, I can say that one didn't work out too well, because in that particular case, they did not work with me, and I would have known if they did on my same team. So be careful what you put on your resumes too, because in that performance engineering realm, it is actually a smaller field and if you run into someone with a long-term experience in it, they may just know or not know you. We also look for, we're listening to the candidate for those pushback questions. This usually is part of the deal when we're asking them. There's part of the open-ended questions as well, where we'll ask something and they'll look at you kind of stumped and say, now wait a minute, define this parameter that you would like us to use as an input, or what about this particular cycle time? Can I do this? Or some of my favorite are around saying, well, I know the answer to this question, but if you ask it this other way, this is the actual other answer. And those are great because it shows their experience across the topic. I've run across probably 3 individuals that successfully pushed back on some of the questions I was asking, and they were technically correct. It was great. Sometimes actually, you actually learn in the interviews a few things that you never thought you knew. Both within some of the tooling and in the process in general for, say, across even the SDLC. Then finally, look for the candidate actually asking you questions. That's important because you want to have the engagement both ways during the interview. And the questions that the candidate asks you are extremely important because they usually will only ask 2 or 3 questions max. And those are going to be the most important ones to them that they need to have answered. All right, and finally down on this next particular slide is the fun part that's actually kind of sad and what's going on in the industry at the moment. And this is, what are you avoiding in these interviews? And how do you find the personnel that you need? The biggest single thing I've seen so far is basically flat out resume fraud. And with that, I'm basically meaning that the candidate submits a resume and it's either a direct falsehood of someone else's or a copy. I actually have seen a duplication of someone's resume at one point in time. And that one was an interesting one to get through. Other times it's just the fact that they've listed a bunch of skills on their resume that they have no idea what they even mean when you get them into the actual interview. It basically wastes a lot of your time, definitely wastes their time because they're not going to get the position anyway. The interview questions before are basically designed to actually get through that. Do they actually know what they know, and they're saying that they actually do know? There's one particular type of this fraud that's I've seen now 3 times in the last year alone, which is what I'm calling technical interview fraud. And that can cover, I guess, many different kinds. The first one I'd like to mention would be the one where if you're doing a remote interview and you're doing it through the phone or, say, Skype. If you're using Skype or some other video interview process, it's a little harder. But we've had a few instances now where the person will call in on the conference number, and another person will call in on a conference number through them, and they'll basically be sharing the conference call number. And when you ask questions to them, you'll hear the voice of another person actually answering your questions. And then eventually later on, you'll hear the original person that was supposed to actually be doing the interview. On the phone ones, that shows up more often, and then it ends up in basically being candidate fraud later whenever you do an in-person interview or you actually hire this person and they have no idea what they're doing when they arrive for you. And that's what I'm calling candidate fraud on the that last bullet point. But when you're doing a Skype interview, the most incredulous one that we've come across was actually during a video interview. What it looked like what was going on was they had the candidate we were interviewing was sitting in front of the camera on the laptop, and they had apparently a mirror set up so the person answering questions could see the screen so they could actually see us. And then they would give answers back to us, so over the audio feed, but the person sitting in front of the camera would basically just be mouthing all the words. It was very disconcerting. And also a telltale sign. Now, one of the things you can do there is basically do the quick finger test. You can basically just hold up to your camera, 2 fingers, 3 fingers, whatever, and then ask the person immediately to say, how many fingers am I holding up? And if there's a strong delay or they actually get it wrong, in one case, they actually got the number wrong. So we actually knew immediately that this was not a valid candidate. And again, it's just a total waste of time for everybody. It's a risk of actually being kicked out of your consultancy if you're coming in through a consultancy to hire firm. It's also a quick way to get that particular hiring company banned from sending individuals for a period of time or forever. I've also seen that happen a few more times. So basically, if you're going to be a candidate, we're looking for someone who's real, who knows what they know, and knows what they do not know, will show up for work for you and be part of the team and participate and help bring the profession forward for you. And that's kind of the goal here. We're trying to find those best candidates overall. And with that, I would like to say thank you and have a great rest of the Vivit SIG Talk. Thank you.
It is now my pleasure to introduce Jonathan Wright. Jonathan is another person I've gotten to know over several years. In the last, say, 15 years or so, really focusing on a lot of different items related to automation, performance, IoT, as well as digital. You may have seen some of his writing in some of the books that he has contributed to. I know there's several from 2012, 2014, 2017 as well. Some of his research includes items around testing as a service models and digital engineering. So some of those related to digital transformation, DevOps, and lifecycle virtualization. He's also an accomplished and frequent keynote speaker at many of the conferences you're probably used to participating in, including Gartner, Star West, Star East, Fusion, ANTZTB, Eurostar, Unicom, and BCS Sigist. Also the winner of the HP Enterprise Innovation Award for World-Class Delivery in Prague in 2015, and the Quality Award for Innovation in Dublin in 2014. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Jonathan.
Digital experiences within the digital performance lifecycle with Jonathan Wright. So in this session, I was going to talk around some new practices and principles. I'm going to talk about how you could potentially look at adopting minimum viable performance. So that's the smallest component you can run from a performance engineering perspective. Therefore, performance as code would be very important. So this ability to execute a number of lines of code which you can check in to GitHub, which will then create the test and actually be able to run and execute performance engineering scripts. And then finally, which is the most important and most difficult component, is around test data as code. The ability to generate synthetic test data on demand as part of your continuous performance delivery pipeline. And what I'm going to demonstrate in this particular session is demos around introducing the concepts around ChatOps, which will allow you to actually execute performance tests directly from Slack or Teams or any of your enterprise collaboration platforms, which allows you to move at an even faster speed. So, digital performance. Over the last few years, I've been working on large-scale projects from machine learning and artificial intelligence to smart cities. I recently did a TED talk on cognitive learning around some of the technologies which you can see on the lists below. However, today I wanted to talk to you around the digital performance lifecycle. And this is this ability to actually look at providing insight, intelligence, learnings, assessment, innovation continuously, so that way you can really focus on the value that you can bring to your organizations in these new, highly complex landscapes. So, what am I going to be discussing today and demonstrating as part of the demos? First is the continuous performance. How do you get it so that you get to a point where every time you do a check-in, you're going to run some minimum viable performance scripts and get initial quick feedback from wherever you are, whether it's that developer machine, whether it's from a unikernel Mirage OS Docker container, or it could be just running into large-scale environments which you're building. Or you could be looking at more complex IoT, Internet of Things, or machine-to-machine endpoints, which we're going to see a lot more of. So therefore, this ability to write performance as code, so the example which I'm going to be giving you is going to be wrapping it in the standard workflow method XAML format, but this could be anything else. This could be XML, it could be a JSON file. All it is a case of a request or a response to a machine to actually kick off the job. Next is the test data as code. This is this ability to keep in the environment that you may be using. So in this case, I'm going to demonstrate Excel, but you could use it in any other format, your flat files, it could be a database, it doesn't really matter. What's important is this ability that you can replace a parameter with a dynamic value. So this is 3 or 4 steps beyond shared data table. So this ability that if you run out of data halfway through a massive soak or test, you can actually synthetically generate it on the fly. It will go off, it'll generate the necessary rows in the databases and allow you to pass that to your agents. So this is incredibly powerful, but it also requires you to model the data and understand the data dependencies of that. And then finally, as I mentioned before, is around enterprise collaboration, the ability to run in something like Slack to be able to kick off jobs using conversational AI. So you've got a lot of smart bots now, so they're going to get smarter and smarter. So they will be able to do most of these tasks and understand the dependencies of data automatically. So let's go into the demo. So this demo, I've used Visual Integration Processor, which is by Curiosity Software Island, a good friend of mine, Hugh Price. I've also demonstrated the HPE LoadRunner Community Edition. And now let's go straight into the demo. Okay, I've opened up this simple Truth client script, and as you can see, it's just navigating to a web page. But this could be an endpoint, this could be an IoT device, it could be a request-response pair. It doesn't really matter. But what we do is we can pass in a parameter. So in this case, I want to pass in the Vivit website, and I want it to run that same single web page and write it to a log. So as you can see, there's a wrapper around here. So what I've done is I've told the wrapper to output into a text file the results of what happens when it executes. So in this case, it's spinning up the network virtualization to give it the more realistic load pattern. And then what I'm doing is I've now got a request response time here of 1.9 seconds. So that's great. However, I've had to execute this directly from the HPE virtual user generator. Now I want to be able to call this directly at the command line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass over the same script. So if you can see here, we've got the same script, but I'm going to run it at the command line. So a simple invoke to pass it over to an expression builder, which is literally just the path to the executor. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run that, but this time I'm running this from the command line. So you'll see this later in the video where we run this directly from Slack, but you could run it from anything. You could run it from Teams, you could run it from your continuous integration and build, Jenkins, whatever you want to do. So let's just quickly go back. What we'll see now is we'll see that this will have executed another script, but also what's more important, so you can see we've not got a 0.79 coming back. It's also written the logs into the location that I'd pointed out to it. So we've got that full history of what actually executed. So we're not losing out any of that debugging capability. But this is just a single parameter. And what I'm going to show you is how you can use powerful data generation to run thousands of parameters. So say for instance we want to extend this out to a much bigger subset. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly go and generate a whole stack of URLs. So let's just pick a country. So if I pick a country like Afghanistan, and then I take, say for instance, the top websites. So in this case, I've picked 10 more websites. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to paste those directly into my web page location. Right, so now I'm going to run those 10 websites, but also what I need to do is just quickly change the runtime settings so that it's going to run 10 times round. Right, but again, I'm not going to run this from the virtual user true client. What I want it to do is run it at the command line. So again, I'm executing that same script, and what we should see in the background is we should see a whole stack of Firefox browser proxies running in headless mode that will actually spin up and execute each one of those websites sequentially until it's executed all of the 10 web pages that I've passed over to it. So as you can see, it runs them and then writes the results out into a log file. So in this case, what we can do is put this into a big data store, and that will allow us to actually have a whole stack of results. So if I quickly go back to temp directory, you can see that we've now got one for each one of those websites. We've also got one for the combined, so we've got the two initial ones, the third one that we ran. With the last demo, I guess you can understand how you can potentially scale this to millions of websites, which is what we've been doing over the Christmas period, on Christmas Day, Boxing Day, and also today, the January sales. We've looked and taken those top 1 million websites and looked at how they're performing as far as performance, but also security, and also functional. And this could include things like mobile. And this is where you can take advantage of things like StormRunner and StormRunner Load and StormRunner Functional to really be able to scale that. And what we've done is provided a report of the top 100 best performing websites during the sales periods within retail for this year's holiday season. But you can also go and grab your own free report if you navigate to the URL above, and all you need to do is put your company domain in and some details, and we will send you a report of how you've scored. And this will run thousands of different tests that will give you some really actionable insight that you can go off and actually improve some performance engineering. Okay, so we're just going to take a very simple example where we've modeled out a simple database schema, taken the necessary table information and column information that we want to extract from that database, And then what we're going to do is we'll use a very powerful data generation engine, which will be able to extract data, the necessary data we need, take hard-coded parameters that we may need for the environment, and also synthetically generate a huge amount of data. And we're talking millions of rows if we can't find the necessary data that already exists within the database. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at some of the powerful functions which will allow us to actually generate synthetic data. So that could be the latitude, longitude that we take to embed within a GPX file, or it could be something as simple as taking valid or invalid customer names so that we can make sure when we generate and we do our execute of our run that we don't get any duplications of client information or the same addresses. So in this case we may need addresses, but we may need addresses from different countries based on the workflow. So what we're going to do now that we've created our requirements for our data generation, we're going to upload that file, that data driver file, into Slack, and then what Slack's going to do is it's going to actually process it. So the first thing it's going to do is it's going to go off and generate all that necessary data, and then the next task it's going to do is it's going to look at actually executing that test against the LoadRunner command line prompt to actually allow you to then run that in the back and then come back with the results. So in this case you can see it's completed successfully, and now if we navigate over to those results which have been processed and run, what we'll be able to see is not only that they've executed successfully, but actually we'll be able to see the whole console of all the debugging information. So within that Excel spreadsheet, all the information that's been created via the run, the virtual user, is actually being logged in here. So we can actually do stuff with this, whether that's we put it into some kind of NoSQL, Cassandra, MongoDB, or we look at putting those results back into our continuous integration tool or continuous deployment tool. And then third, you could get it so that it automatically sends you the results into, say for instance, Outlook, so that way when you have a look, you can actually look at what's been executed, what the values it used to execute that test, and what data it created, and what the request and response pairs came back out of that. As you can see, this is an extremely powerful capability, and it allows you to do this minimum viable performance test. That final demo hopefully gives you a bit of an idea of how we can start moving on to this next generation of cognitive learning, where we can use things like conversational AI to automate most of those workflows that are extremely tedious and data prep activities, and they can be done with a simple command line. So this could be you just talking to a bot that allows you to say, I need to get some data for this particular project, I need this environment building, and the rest will be done automatically. Thank you.
It is now my pleasure to introduce you to Stuart Moncrief. Stuart will be sharing with us a proven practice of what is the next step after version control. If you do not already know Stuart, he is an internationally recognized expert in web performance testing. He has over a decade spent as a performance specialist. He's also a regular speaker at conferences and dedicated to improving web performance everywhere. He very much believes in sharing knowledge and hates it when people waste time reinventing the wheel. He's written over 100,000 words on web performance and shares his writing and source code, including examples and libraries, on his website. That website you can see here, which is myloadtest.com. Each month, over 10,000 people read something that he has written. So, Stuart, I would now like to turn it over to you.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining me. I know that we're all keen to improve the quality of the performance testing work that we do, and I thought we could take a proven practice from the software development world and apply it to our performance testing world. It's only pretty recently that a lot of us have started using version control for our scripts. If you've already done that, I'm going to be telling you what your next step should be. And if you follow my advice, you will have advanced to software development practices that were common in the late 90s. Software-based version control has been around since the 70s, and for a software developer, use of version control has been taken as a given since at least the 90s. But in the performance testing world, it's only in the last couple of years that support for version control has been built into our tools, so we're very much late adopters when it comes to version control. And when the dev team finds out that you're not version controlling your scripts, they kind of look at you like you're a caveman or something. But at least with version control, we're finally catching up. So what other common standard development practices are we not doing? Let me tell you about static code analysis. Static code analysis has been around since the late 70s, and it finds bugs in your program by reading and analyzing the source code rather than compiling and running the software. Some kind of static analysis is built into most modern development environments, and dev teams add static analysis tools to their CI pipelines. Examples of things you might do with a static analysis tool are maybe picking up unsafe use of memory in a C program, or maybe just simple stuff like enforcing stylistic preferences in the source code, or maybe you're going to pick up security defects. In fact, there's a static analysis tool for web application security defects that is sold by Micro Focus, and it's available either as a standalone product or as Fortify on demand. And it looks for web application security defects like SQL injection or directory traversal. Simple things that you can pick up from the source code. Sometimes my clients will say that they don't need a static analysis tool because they already do code reviews, and I say, that's great, you're halfway there, but let's take the list of things you look for in manual code reviews and see how much of that we can automate. Wouldn't it be nice to have a computer do the boring stuff and save your time for the high-value activities? The number of performance testers that don't bother to check that the server is giving them the correct response under load astounds me. Wouldn't it be nice if we could make sure that, at a minimum, performance testers are writing scripts with checks in them? And there's a whole bunch of other scripting standards that are definitely machine checkable. So who are the people who might benefit from a static analysis tool? Imagine that you're the manager of testing services at a large bank. So you're responsible for all sorts of testing at the bank, but because performance testing has been so expensive, it's been outsourced to a low-cost offshore testing services partner. Now, your level of confidence in the quality of the work might be kind of low. There's not a lot you can do about it. The decision to engage them has been out of your hands. But you want to ensure that they're doing the best job possible. You want to keep your vendor, who you're paying millions of dollars a year to, you want to keep them honest. But part of your challenge is that you don't have that many staff, and you certainly don't have budget for more staff yourself. And in order to keep a testing services partner honest and keep the quality of their work high, there are certain governance tasks that you kind of have to do. If you had a static analysis tool, you might be able to monitor the scripts that are added to the Performance Center repository. And maybe you want to plot the bad scripts on a dashboard. Maybe you want to alert when the scripts are checked in and they're not up to quality standards. But it gives you a window, some visibility into the sort of work that is being done for you. Maybe if you're particularly cunning and you got in early enough, you can ensure that there's some fine print in the contract with the testing services partner that says all scripts should meet internal quality standards. And now you have a tool that is a way to measure their compliance with your internal quality standards. And when they don't, it gives you some leverage to encourage them to improve the quality of the work that they're doing. On the other side of the coin, imagine that you're the practice manager at the outsourcing firm that got the contract with the bank. You've got an offshore team of mostly grads and fairly inexperienced staff, but you know that if they do a really bad job, you'll lose the contract with the bank. Your challenge is, how do you uplift the quality of the work that your team is doing without cloning yourself and individually hovering over every single member of the team, because you certainly don't have time to do that. A static analysis tool would help your team boost the quality of the scripts that they deliver. It would allow you to keep some form of control over the quality of the scripts that your team's writing, to encourage them to do a better job, and to hopefully not end up disappointing your client despite all of the constraints in terms of people power that you have. A static code analysis tool for your load testing scripts is useful whether you're new as a performance tester or you're really experienced. Either way, it's a safety net. For a beginner, it helps catch all of those really common mistakes that all beginners make. And for an experienced performance tester, well, everyone makes mistakes occasionally, and it's nice to have a tool pick them up when you do make them. As a senior person, it's also nice knowing that the rest of the team are meeting quality standards when they check their scripts in. If you're already using version control for your load testing scripts, the next step in maturity for your team is to add a static analysis component. You can use a Git pre-commit hook to automatically run your static analysis tool before anyone checks in code. If there are problems with the script, well, it prevents you from checking them in. And if there's not, well, you know that the script complies with your internal standards. You can even use this to improve the quality of a repository full of existing scripts. Every time someone modifies a script and goes to check in their change, well, the entire script must meet the quality standards that are defined by the static analysis tool. So you'll gradually, one by one, as each script is touched, improve the quality of all of the scripts in the performance testing script repository. I hope I've managed to convey to you how static analysis can help improve the quality of the scripts that your performance testing team is writing. I hope you see how this is the next step in maturity for performance testing, and maybe feel just a tiny bit embarrassed that we're still 20 years behind the software development teams that we love to find defects for. Thanks for listening, and good luck with your performance testing.
I'd like to go ahead and share with you some other upcoming Vivit webinars that we have. As you can see, here's two of them that I'm highlighting. First of which is on the 25th of January, the Next Generation Network Management from Micro Focus. You can see the times. You can click on the link to go ahead and register now. Also, January 30th, we've got a DevOps SIG webinar, and you can see the times and the link to click on to register there as well. So for the Vivit SIG Talk agenda that we've got for 2018, as well as the survey, as well as, you know, what are the different topics that we'll be covering on what dates, and who is moderating and hosting those, the URL in front of you here, simply click on that and you will be taken to the page with everything, or you could simply type that into your browser. Also, the hashtag Vivit SIG Talk. Again, we are using this to continue the conversation, not only during the live events, but also after the events, as you may want to engage with some of the speakers or some of the other Vivid members that are participating in these with you. With that, I would like to thank you all for joining us today for this Vivid SIG talk focusing on quality and testing proven practices, as we're looking to continue to provide great education as well as advocacy and community for you, our membership, as well as would encourage you to share this information as well as the vividworldwide.org website with your peers and your friends to encourage them to be able to also learn and share their ideas with this community that we have. Thank you again.